Are you planning to buy a block or build a house? Because when looking at building for the first time, there can be a lot of information. It can feel overwhelming and you just don't know where to turn to avoid getting ripped off. In this video, I'm going to go through the specific due diligence steps which you need to take on the block, the price, the location, the services, and any other information which is going to impact what you can actually build on that piece of land. With any property purchase, you are putting your hard-earned dollars into it, and this is why you want to make sure you don't have any avoidable costs or mistakes which might trip you up along the way. So let's get into block due diligence. What I like to do is break the due diligence up into 6 key areas. These are the block, location, services, planning, and price, and finally we have legals. Getting into the block, the first thing that you want to look at is the slope. There's 2 ways to do it. Firstly, you can go on site and have a look at the property. The second thing you can do is ask the developer or selling agent for the contour and feature survey. Anything over a 700 fall across the block will more than likely add to your construction costs because of the need for retaining. Then we need to work out what the soil condition of the block is. Ideally, it is an A-class sandy site. The best way to do this is ask the selling agent or developer for a copy of the geotech report. A geotech report basically outlines the soil condition and the depth of which the water table is at. The geotech report will cover what type of engineering or earthworks that the builder will need to do in order to be able to build on the property. These geotech reports can be quite complicated to read, and it might be worthwhile passing it on to your builder and seeing if there's anything in there which may impact your construction price. Tacking on from the geotech report, another thing you need to ask the developer is what earthworks they have done to your block. This might include things such as compaction or changing the natural ground level. If they've done compaction to the block, you might want to ask for a compaction certificate confirming that the site works have been completed so that you can go ahead and build on that block. The dimensions of the block is important, in particular the width. If you are considering a double garage, you need at least 6 meters just to fit the garage, and then you'll need pedestrian access and also some frontage to the house itself. While we're on the topic, it's worthwhile mentioning that orientation is also important. The most ideal orientation for a block is north-south, with the backyard or living areas facing the north. So when you are considering where your frontage is to the property, also consider where the orientation to the living areas is as well. It's also important to consider the verge of the block, and in particular any assets or infrastructure which sits on the council's verge. This includes things such as street lights, bus stops, power lines, curb trees, the green power dome, and the water meter. Because if you have to change the crossover and you can't move these items, firstly they can be costly, but secondly, if you're moving the crossover, this moves the garage and this changes your building design plans, which ultimately will change the entire house that you're planning to put on that block. And the final site-specific due diligence which you must do is hit the subscribe and like button, because if you've learned something in the first couple of minutes of this video, it would be great. It would be very great to know. So go down there and hit that button. Let's move on to locational due diligence for when you are buying a block of land. The first step of this is busy roads. And guess what? When you are buying in a brand new estate, there is no such thing as busy roads. And this is because no one lives there yet, so there are no cars on the road, and it's very easy to overlook a busy road. So what I would encourage you to do is get the estate plan and confirm on the map if it looks like a busy road. A good way to do this would be to see if lots of roads connect to it, and then this road connects on to a major distributed road in the area. And another hint to a busier road is bus routes. So if you dig up the council's bus route maps and it's planning to be on a bus route or currently is on a bus route, it's more than likely a busier road. There are a few negative characteristics of a bus route. For example, if you're by some traffic calming such as a roundabout, you will continue to hear buses throughout the night, or until at least the bus services stop. The other thing is if you have a bus hail spot at the front of your property, guess what? This could turn into a bus shelter quite quickly, and there is nothing you could do to stop it. And consequently, it could become an eyesore for the brand new property which you have just built. I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on this, but avoid high tension power lines and highways. The reason for this is banks don't like it, and ultimately you may need to sell the property down the track. So even if it doesn't matter you, the next buyer may be put off by it. A good trick here is to jump on Google Satellite View, and if there's large tracts of land that look like a potential highway, it's worthwhile investigating it with the local council or your main roads department. And while you're speaking to your local council, it would be worthwhile asking them if the block of land is located in a bushfire zone or in a flood area. This not only adds to construction costs, but it may continue to add to your insurance premiums over time. And the final thing to ask your local council is the street address. It's quite common in estate plans to have the lot number which don't necessarily relate to the street number. If you're located on a corner block, you just want to confirm with the local council the particular mailing address which you are going to have, because if you have house plans that orientate your garage to one street and you are ultimately on an entirely different address, this would, I guess, change the entire plans of your house. It's crazy to think that you can go out and buy a block of land, but it may not be connected to services. Now, this is not something that happens too frequently, but let's get on to the due diligence around services. The first services to look at are the main sewers. So if you go onto a website 1100.com.au, they will be able to get you a map of the freshwater and sewer in your particular state and area. What you want to do is get the sewer map and confirm that it firstly doesn't bisect your site or sit well within your block. It's okay if it's right on a back boundary or a front boundary, but if it's on side boundaries or further than say 2 or 3 meters into the rear or front of your property, you just want to confirm with your builder or your designer as to the impacts this might have on your design. Then this sounds a little bit crazy, but the next thing you need to do is confirm that the actual block itself is physically connected to the sewer that runs straight past your property. The way you would do this is to speak to the developer and ask for an as constructed sewer diagram. In some states there's an online database where you can pay a fee and you can get a copy of that anyway. So I would just encourage that you've confirmed that the sewer is connected to your property. Then we get onto power, and almost all modern power installs are underground, so you just want to confirm where that green dome is, and again, as I mentioned before, you just want to confirm where it sits on the verge and if it's going to impact the crossover. And finally, fresh water, is the water meter connected or do you need to pay a service charge? Let's move on to planning due diligence. I've actually condensed this step because there's a lot of other areas that touch on it. The first thing you want to do is get the estate plan for your particular area and see how this fits in with the master plan or the master estate, because this will give you an idea as to how the suburb will look in 5, 10, 15 years once the entire land development is finished. It's quite common nowadays that many estates have design guidelines. This effectively limits the height, the size, the garage location, or even the finish of the type of house which you are planning to build. Both of these items aren't exactly deal breakers, but it's just important to be informed and understand exactly what you will need to do in order to be able to build in that particular estate. Let's move on to the price component of due diligence when buying a block of land. And the first step in price due diligence is to, you know what I'm going to say, subscribe to this channel, because by subscribing to this channel and hitting that like button, it encourages me to produce more of this free content so that you can gain that knowledge. The first thing I do when looking at different blocks is to establish a dollar per square meter price. Effectively, this is the price they're asking divided by the amount of square meters of block. What you'll find is that smaller blocks generally have a higher dollar per square meter rate than larger blocks. With this information, what I would do is go out and compare other blocks of land which have sold in established areas, other estates that are advertising blocks of land, and also other blocks of land within the estate to see if the dollar per square meter rate of my block represents fair value. The first trick I do is using Google to tell me if the word incentive or discount is used anywhere on the land estate's website. And the way I do this is effectively type in incentive or discount first, whichever the one of the two you want to use, site, then the land estate's URL, and effectively if that term's used in any page on the entire website, it should show a result. The next thing I do is to try and work out if there is any historical discounts or incentives which the developer has offered, and maybe I might just be able to ask for these now. The way I use this is through a service called Wayback Machine. So if you Google Wayback Machine, it will pop up, and then you put the land estates URL into their search, and effectively you'll be able to click through previous dates of this land estates website and see if there was any historical incentives. The final thing to do with pricing is to confirm with the developer what else is included with the block. Is the developer going to pay for fencing, crossovers, or landscaping? Because these are common incentives which is provided by the developer, and if you don't ask, you don't get. But if they don't offer it, at least you will know and be able to budget it in your construction price. Well, let's get on to the final stage, and this is the legal due diligence of the block itself. The first thing you want to find out is if the property is a strata property or a freehold property. If it's a strata property, then you will need to know a few more questions. Then you will need to have a few more questions answered. These questions include: what is the strata costs, or what are the strata fees? Which part of the property is common property, and if there is any restrictions under the strata scheme that may prohibit the types of buildings which you may be considering building on that particular strata lot. It's quite common in modern strata schemes is that they are what's known as a survey strata, and effectively the only common property is the common access leg, and this would be my most preferred option because anything else adds complexity. Then you will want to go and get a copy of the property's title. If the property is not yet titled, which a lot of land estates aren't, you may just want to ask them if there are any proposed easements or covenants which are going to get registered on the title. The second thing you want to do is get a copy of the surveyor's sketch, and again, if that property title has not been issued yet, then there won't be a final sketch, so you can ask for a draft surveyor's sketch of your particular block and confirm there are not any easements on the property as well. If there are easements, just get an understanding of what they are and what they relate to and what they restrict you doing. As I briefly mentioned before, if titles have not been issued yet, you want to ask the developer two questions. Firstly, you want to ask when they anticipate titles to be ready. And the second thing is you want to know when the latest date contractually is that they have to have titles back by, otherwise you can walk from the contract. And the reason for this is you don't want to be on the hook for 1, 2, or 3 years if titles get delayed and you're still contractually bound to buying that block of land. If your latest date is more than 3 months from your finance approval, the other question which you should be asking the developer or the selling agent is what happens if there is a change in my financial circumstances and I'm no longer able to get finance. Sometimes contracts can be made subject to finance, and sometimes they will get you a pre-approval and then waiver finance to an unconditional contract. If the latter is the case, what then can happen is if you're unable to settle on the block of land, you could forfeit your deposit and get sued for any further damages. So just be mindful that ideally, if the titles are a long time in the future, you want to make sure that this is still subject to you obtaining finance. Now, until you buy an awesome block of land following all these due diligence steps, or my next video, best of luck and goodbye.